Hi, how you doing? Good, I hope. I've been reading a book here that I have to read you a bit of the part of it before I can go any farther because I'm afraid I'll lose it. And the name of it is The 15 Biggest Lies About the Economy and Everything Else the Right Doesn't Want You to Know About Taxes, Jobs, and Corporate America by Joshua Holland. Oh, he's a good writer. And here on page 14, it only took me that long to see him writing with truth shining out. A more subtle approach is to convince a majority of voters that your interests are in fact their own. Yet there's a big problem with this. If you belong to a rarefied group, then the notion of aligned interests doesn't reflect objective reality. And in the early 1970s, the media and academia provided a neutral arbiter of that reality of sorts. We've all grown accustomed to conservatives' conspiracy theories about the corporate media having a far left bias and college professors indoctrinating American youth into Maoism. In the early 1970s, a group of very wealthy conservatives started to invest in what you might call intellectual infrastructure, ostensibly designed to counter the liberal bias they saw all around them. They funded dozens of corporate-backed think tanks, endowed academic chairs, and created their own dedicated and distinctly conservative media outlets. Families with names such as HOLLAND, Coors, Scaife, Bradley, and Koch may not be familiar to most Americans, but their efforts have had a profound impact on our economic discourse. Having amassed huge fortunes in business, these dynasties used their foundations to fund the movement that would culminate in the election of Ronald Reagan in 1980 and eventually bring about the coronation of George W. Bush in 2000. In 1973, brewer Joseph Coors kicked in $250,000 for seed money to start the now highly influential Heritage Foundation. With the help of the HOLLAND, Scaife, Bradley, and DeVois foundations. In 1977, Charles Koch, an oil billionaire, started the Libertarian Cato Institute. Richard Mellon Scaife, a wealthy right-wing philanthropist, who would later fund the shady Arkansas Project that almost brought down Bill Clinton's presidency, bought the Pittsburgh Tribune Review in 1970. The American Enterprise Institute, which was founded as the American Enterprise Association in the 1930s and remained relatively obscure through the 1960s, was transformed into an ideological powerhouse when it added a research facility in 1972. The Hoover Institution, funded by Herbert himself in 1928, saw a huge increase in funding in the 1960s and would be transformed during the 1980s into the Washington advocacy organization that it is today. In 1982, billionaire and right-wing Masonic leader Sun Myung Moon started the Washington Times as an antidote to the liberal Washington Post, the paper which promoted competition in the free market over all other human virtues would be subsidized by the Moonies to a tune of $1.7 billion during the next 20 years. In 2000, United Press International, a venerable but declining newswire, was brought up by Moon's media conglomerate, World News Communications. With generous financing from the same group of conservative foundations, the Federal Society was founded in 1982 by former Attorney General Ed Meese, controversial Supreme Court nominee Robert Bork and Ted Olson, who years later would win the infamous Bush versus Gore case before the Supreme Court in 2000 and then go on to serve as Bush's Solicitor General. The Federal Society continues to have a major impact on our legal community. In 2005, one of the most influential right-wing funders, the John M. Olin Foundation, actually declared its mission accomplished and closed up shop. The New York Times reported that after 3 decades financing the intellectual rise of the right, the Foundation's services were no longer needed. The Times reported that the loss of Olin wasn't terribly troubling for the movement because whereas a generation ago just 3 or 4 major foundations operated on the right, today's conservatism has no shortage of institutions, donors, or brio. And that's not even mentioning Rupert Murdoch's vast and vastly dishonest media empire. The rise of the conservative noise machine has been discussed at length in a number of other works, and conservatives dismiss it as a conspiracy theory of sorts. In truth, it's anything but. It's simply a matter of people with ample resources engaging in some savvy politics in an age of highly effective mass communication. There's nothing new about that. What's changed is that the world of advertising and marketing has become increasingly sophisticated, and the right has played the instrument of modern public relations like a maestro. It's through info like this that we can find out by name who is guilty of all this murder and things. And I'm not surprised. There has been families here in Oklahoma that I've heard about and listened to people's stories about how their family was killed by these people just so they could take their land or anything else that they had. This is wrong, and you better stand up and scream about it. We need to get something done with psychopaths like this, or they could end up killing everybody. I have some other ideas about what's going on with this stuff, so I'll be back later. And I hope wherever you are, day or night, you have a really nice one. See you later.